Anyone who knows me knows that for like the last 10 years, I've been saying that the United States as we know it will cease to exist in 2026. And I will tell you why I think that is. For starters, every empire lasts about 250 years, right? And the 250th birthday of the United States is next year, 2026. Also, studying the rise and fall of many empires throughout our time. The ones that I looked into was Rome, the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, the British Empire. Those are ones that I compared because a lot of them they have components of how they run their empire very similarly to how the United States moves. And what they all have in common is towards the end, every single one of these empires had mass wage inequality. So that means the wealthy class had the vast majority of the resources and the money and wealth of the empires, while like 90% of the rest of the country were basically struggling. There was also increased corruption, and these empires focused more on their imperial and colonial pursuits rather than at home. So like Ottoman Empire was starting a bunch of wars. Or World War I, they were literally just beefing with everybody. They were just cracking down on any dissent. The Russian Empire too, they were spending their money on just wars. World War I. Rome was literally spending a bunch of money on war. Inflation was also a big contributor. These are all things that we see in America, right? The United States is in like $53 trillion in debt. We barely have clean running water. Our infrastructure is failing. People are living paycheck to paycheck. Some people have lost their jobs and hasn't fully recovered after COVID. And our government thinks it's, especially freshly out of COVID, our government thought it was better. Instead of helping the country who was devastated by a global pandemic, they decided to start an endless war in Ukraine that had nothing to do with us as Americans, right? Solely because America wanted to keep its political power in that region and wanted to threaten Russia, right? So just war pursuits. Same in Palestine. They were literally funding a genocide, sending billions and billions and billions of dollars, just printing fucking money solely to keep their colonial post in the Middle East, which is Israel, alive. While inflation is going insane, the wage inequality is insane in this country. We're losing social services, right? They've cut Medicare, they've cut food stamps, they've cut all this stuff, but they're like, you know what, who needs this money? War. Also, the fact that the government won't help working class people, but will bail out Wall Street any chance it can get. Like, these are just a handful of examples. Not to mention the rise of distrust in the government that's been happening in the last, I want to say since 2008. 2008 was, well, I wouldn't even say 2008. I will say maybe like around 2006. After 9/11 and when Bush sent us into these meaningless wars in the Middle East, a lot of people started not trusting their government so much. And one person that they thought was going to change that was Obama. But the first thing Obama did after, the recession was literally bail out the banks that screwed the entire country over, which later on pushed for more people to not trust the government, which leads to what? Fascism. Yeah, you guessed it. Trump won the first time because he ran as the alternative to the deep state, right? That's why Trump is elected. Obviously, there are people who are like fascist and like racist, and they voted for him for that main reason. But a lot of people who will say that they're not racist, even though like they're gonna side with a man who goes with racist policies. Most of the reasons why they said that is because they're like, we need to drain the swamp and like fight like the deep state or whatever, because it's gotten to a point where the American people don't even trust politicians because they can't even trust them, because they're like, you guys say one thing to us and then do the opposite, only for Trump to turn around and do the same thing. And the fact that we don't have any political opposition in this country, both sides are fighting for one side. So we literally have just the Washington elites, who only thing they seem to care about is pushing imperial missions and goals and continue to colonize and exploit the global south, corporations and just lining their own pockets, not caring about the well-being of this country. And I feel like one of the main things that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can see America going far, is that we don't even have a sense of collectivisms. A lot of Americans are starting to see each other as enemies. So we're literally experiencing infighting within our own countries. We're too caught up in culture wars to realize that all of us are getting fucked in the ass. Every single one of us are getting fucked. You guys are mad at like the immigrant community, or like the fact that transgender people want to use bathrooms, but not the fact that we don't have clean water, we don't have infrastructure, our food is literally being poisoned. There's a recall every other week. The quality of life and the cost of living ain't adding up. Why am I paying more for less quality of life? And seeing that I've made that, prediction that America don't seem like it's it's not gonna last very long. The closer and closer we get to 2026, the clearer and clearer it gets. And sometimes I feel like, you know what? I wish I was wrong, but I'm not. And it's so sad. And today, with the ICE raids and the deployment of military force on the American people, just seal the deal. This is why I always push an anti-war narrative, because for the last 20-something years, the United States has been literally performing atrocities, literally killing people, doing literal war crimes across the world. And people in America turn a blind eye because they're like, well, they're not us. They're not us. Those are them desert dwellers, those towel head terrorists. And it's like, that doesn't make it right. Just because it's not your group doesn't make it okay. Because what makes you think, if they can dehumanize a human being to the point that they can justify killing millions of Iraqis in Iraq, funding genocides in Palestine, poisoning waters in Latin America, what makes you think that same government won't turn around and do it to you? And that's what we're experiencing today. The same military we've propped up to colonize and destabilize the entire world is now turning around and doing the same to American people. Yeah.
This country has always had an inverted relationship to the truth. And that is because the image of this country, the image that we project to our own citizens and to the rest of the world, has always been based on a lie. Now we are in a point in human history. Now we are in a point in American history where that lie is unraveling. And instead of panicking, and instead of giving away your hope, and instead of being afraid that you're losing your freedoms, you just need to let the lie unravel, let the tower crumble, and let the light go out. When Kamala Harris said, only when it's darkest can we see the stars, the reason that was such a bar is because the false light that America has been projecting for centuries has been blocking out the real light of the stars. The freedoms that we have believed we had up until now have been an illusion. And you can tell they've been an illusion based on how many of us are saddled with student loan debt for the crime of trying to further our education, based on how many of us are saddled with medical debt for the crime of trying to be healthy, based on how many poisonous ingredients are flanking our grocery store shelves, and most people have no choice but to eat those because they can't afford organic. And organic is exorbitantly priced because they want you to eat the poison shit so that they can funnel you back into the hospitals, so that they can have their hand even deeper in your pocket and gorge themselves on the medical debt that's plaguing this country. You can't understand how trapped and how enslaved Americans are until you travel other places. And most people can't afford to travel other places because America makes sure to overprice travel so that we don't see outside of the matrix. This country's inverted relationship with the truth is solely due to its core depravity. This country is depraved. And what I mean by that, the definition of depravity is moral corruption and wickedness. And you have to understand, everything that we were told about this country being the land of the free and the home of the brave, in some ways that's true. But up until about 60 years ago, we were all living in an apartheid state. And most white people didn't know it because democracy only applied to them. Not even to all of them. Democracy has really only ever applied to white men in this country until very, very recently. White women thought they were experiencing democracy because of their proximity to white men, but you still couldn't have your own bank accounts just like the rest of us. They still didn't want to allow you to vote, and you had to fight tooth and nail to get that right in 1919. And even then, most women just voted the way their husbands told them to because they weren't growing up in a democracy. They had the soft, fuzzy chains of marriage slavery, and they were conditioned to do whatever a man told them to do. That is not democracy. That is not freedom. Black people not being able to walk down the street without the fear of being snatched up and lynched or thrown in jail for loitering, which is literally just standing there, that's not democracy. That's not freedom. You cannot enslave a quarter of the population. You cannot imprison a quarter of the population like we're doing today. The United States holds 25% of the world's prisoners. 25% of the 8 billion people on this planet are imprisoned. Sorry, that was about to be a misrepresentation. There are 8 billion people on this planet. I don't know how many prisoners there are on this planet. Let's say there's 1 billion prisoners. 25% of those billion prisoners are here in this country. And this country, whether at the state level or at the federal level, works overtime to make sure that we don't get too much freedom because then that cuts into their profit. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Recently, in the past few years, Alabama, which is the state that I live in, they legalized THCA, which is basically just regular weed, right? Ever since Trump got in office, they decided, we could make so much more money by criminalizing weed again. So just in the past month, they have not only recriminalized THCA, mind you, we had vape stores, we had smoke shops, we had all of these shops selling the actual green flower itself. They criminalized it again, so that's cutting into these people's business models. Most of these businesses are going to go bankrupt. And right before they recriminalized weed, they gave the police force immunity. Why would they give the police force immunity and recriminalize weed? Because in 2020, when Alabama got all of that COVID money from the federal government, do you know what they used it for? They did not use it to improve our schools or our roads or our hospitals or our public spaces. They used it to build more prisons. What kind of a land of the free acts like that? What's happening right now in America is we're all finally getting on the same page about what this country is really about. So that now that we can agree that the GOP is really just a group of pedophiles, now that we can agree that Trump just wants to see the world burn because his mommy didn't love him enough and his daddy hated him, now that we can finally agree that the Democrats sabotaged Kamala Harris and that they're spineless, feckless losers, now that we can finally agree that white supremacy is a myth that has had all of us in a stranglehold for centuries, Now that we can agree that white people are no better than the rest of us and that we're all human beings and that the way we cast our votes matter because we are a part of a human family and our actions do affect the real lives of others, now that we're finally starting to come to an understanding about that, we can now start to look around and notice the depravity that exists all around us. And this depravity is painted as power. And this depravity is painted as, it's so inverted that this moral corruption is confusing the minds of the masses. So people think that disowning your children because they're gay is the godly way. That is depravity. Men think that lording over women and treating them like objects and giving their bodies to anything with a pulse makes them more powerful as men. That is depravity. The use of religion to justify some of the gravest sins against humanity, looking at you, Israel, this is depravity. And now we're finally all waking up to the fact that depravity has been the moral code for as long as anybody can remember. And I'm not a purist. I'm not here to say that everybody should just be a good little girl and a good little boy, but you need to be able to acknowledge depravity for what it is. The amount of people that support Donald Trump because they cannot see how evil he is, that is by design. You're not supposed to be able to recognize evil because how else could they control you? You're not supposed to have discernment. Because if you had discernment, you would never vote Republican again. If you had discernment, if we all had discernment, the governmental system as it exists right now would be no more. And that's where we're headed to, by the way. When Kamala Harris says the system is broken, so she has to work from the outside in now, if you know, you know, that's a whole nother video. But the way that we're going is not working, and it has never actually worked. Mass incarceration, gerrymandering, redlining, misogyny, racism, all of these social cancers are what make up Western culture. And if we ever actually hope to be free and for our children to be free, you have got to calm down and let this illusion that we've been existing in crumble for good. You can't sit here wringing your hands being like, oh my God, America's done. America as we know it is over. Good. Now maybe we can actually create the America that was supposed to be in the first place. One that invites everybody to the table in love and compassion rather than creating this hierarchy of exclusion.
The reason why a lot of us aren't panicking and are allowing y'all to talk about the important stuff is because we told y'all. This isn't a we told y'all so post, but we literally told y'all. And I remember saying specifically, some of y'all need to get outside of the internet and actually talk to people. That's how you gonna get very important information. Y'all remember when they told me I needed to shut the fuck up when I said they was gonna start tampering or find a way to tamper with that 401k? That's why I'm not really studying none of the stuff, because we already know what's happening and knowing what's gonna happen. Y'all gotta understand that this stuff was supposed to happen because all of the infrastructure is barely holding on, so all of this stuff is just erupting and it's gonna get bigger, badder, and bolder. Half of y'all don't want to tap into your true power. You're wondering how we had the information. We downloaded it. We already had it in our system, in our brains. Our ancestors chose us. And all of y'all acting a foolio because y'all don't know what to doolio. We done told y'all what to do with that too. Just stop, resisting, and flow. Just be still. The right people finna be right and the wrong people finna be left. There's no need to panic because everybody already know what's up.